Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in the mind-gut connection by Mayer. Chapter 1 gave us the emotional body state. Chapter 2 is a transitional chapter from emotional body state to cognitive awareness. Chapter 3 will deal with cognitive awareness. So this is pages 29 to 51. It is the transition chapter. And that means we discuss communication in Block 1. And that is bidirectional communication. The brain sends a signal pattern to the gut. The gut then mirrors the emotional brain, the limbic system, the midbrain. Any perceived threat causes signals to be sent to the hypothalamus, which then releases stress molecules like corticotropin, releasing factor called CRF. CRF triggers body response, and it triggers throwing the body into stress mode. CRF also will migrate into adjacent areas to the hypothalamus. And in this way, the migrating motor complex gets affected. The motor complex that sweeps clean the gut of unwanted microbes. Now the ENS is the signaling center of the gut area. It has an incoming layer and it has an outcoming layer. It operates independently most of the time. It has its own circuit of nerve cells, incoming and outgoing, and the emotional brain communicates with the ENS. And it can interfere with the autonomic functions of the motor complex. But the signals are received from the emotional brain center. Block 2, it's from the emotional brain center. The emotional brain signals the ENS through sending stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Through the incoming pathway, the vagus nerve pathway, and the sympathetic nerve pathway. There are two nerve pathways that regulate and tune the ENS nervous system, and it does mirror the emotional brain. And the gut cells even make adaptations. They become more sensitive. But we're talking about, in this transition area, it's the role of the limbic system, the primitive emotional brain that we're talking about. It generates emotion using emotional operating programs. Using emotional operating programs that are executed automatically. This is an autonomic function. These operating programs are located at the gene level. They're inherited from our parents, and they are formed through early life experience. And chemical tags are added to the programs that heighten their sensitivity. And this can create exaggerated gut responses, which makes it difficult for the mind-body to maintain homeostasis. And homeostasis is the internal balance. The entire mind-gut complex seeks to maintain homeostasis, internal balance. Homeostasis and internal balance. An activated stress program. An activated stress program signals the gut ENS, releasing endorphins of well-being, or dopamine for desire and motivation. And that, to me, is critical. That one role of this homeostasis architecture is this release of dopamine, which is a signal for motivation. And as we mentioned before, this is why this is so important for phenomenology and theology, because the motivational body state is more or less that which is discussed in cognitive psychology and in phenomenology, and it relates very definitely in a direct way to this dopamine signaling. This release of dopamine influences motivation, along with increased CRF. And that affects the metabolic landscape overall. So what we learn is that the communication that functions as a transition from emotional body state to cognitive awareness happens to be the limbic system. It happens to be the midbrain limbic system that communicates with the ENS in a bidirectional way, because the ENS has input and output layers. So Mayer concludes this section with block 3, from sensation to conscious awareness. Here's our transition statements. From gut back to the brain. Most gut sensations never reach conscious awareness. They must travel upward through the vagus nerve bundle, out of the originating gut microbiota. Because the ENS dedicated nervous system cannot on its own generate consciousness. It cannot. It operates on its own for its own specific functions, but not conscious awareness. Instead, the ENS is and must constantly communicate with the brain. And that communication is part of that bidirectional communication between brain and gut, and will eventually trigger neurons in the cognitive areas of the brain. So you've got this dialectical communication between limbic system and the ENS. The ENS has incoming and outgoing layers in its own right. And this communication has as its goal homeostasis, maintaining metabolic internal balance. Because it will transcend itself. It will transcend out of emotional body state into cognitive conscious awareness, which we will get into in the next chapter, but it will make a transition out of a strict limbic system ENS dialogue and maintaining internal homeostasis, internal balance. It will transcend itself through this bidirectional communication to reach awareness, So in block 1, we would probably want to look at note 2 again, that any perceived threat causes signals to be sent to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus then releases stress molecules like CRF. Then the body switches into stress mode, and it does this because communication is reaching the ENS in note 4. And you have the emotional brain influencing the ENS system in the gut. Now, block 2, we definitely want to look at 2 and 3, the fact that there are 2 nerve pathways, an incoming and an outgoing, and also that communication comes from the limbic system, the emotional brain, the midbrain area, and it does cause the ENS to mirror the emotional brain. In other words, they are communicating in tandem with each other, and that bidirectional communication is going to eventually transcend itself and move into the area of conscious awareness, which we'll pick up in chapter 3. But here we get the transitional area of dialectical communication and signaling from the limbic primitive emotional brain. That's going to wrap up chapter 2, pages 29 to 51, and we'll pick up next time in chapter 3 and that transition to conscious awareness.